This is your Weather Extreme video for Sunday, January the 6th. I'm meteorologist Brian Peters. Thanks for tuning in. Interesting temperature trace. I noted yesterday that I'd had a more typical temperature trace, but look at this temperature trace from my weather station for the last 24 hours. Isn't that interesting, the way we just flattened out there around Saturday afternoon, and we pretty much stayed steady all night. Very fascinating. Well, this morning, the Alpha Skycam network showing some cloudy skies across the state. Looks like by radar most of the rain is out of the area, but as long as we stick with a few clouds and we have the trough to our west, until that trough goes by, we may see a few sprinkles. Cloudy also at Demopolis as we watch a barge. I'm not sure. I think it's headed down the river by the looks. The weather pattern is gradually going to be replaced by high pressure that is moving in from the west and move into our area. As I mentioned, the trough should be moving by as it comes across the lower Mississippi River Valley later today, and that should help to clear things out for us. Temperatures across the country pretty chilly, still fairly mild over the southeastern U.S. and along the west coast. Otherwise, it's fairly typical January and early January at that. Temperatures across central Alabama generally around the 40-degree mark. As I say, most temperatures didn't fall very much. Radar showing that we still have some echoes across the southern third or so of Alabama, but it looks like for the most part, other than maybe a few sprinkles, which are going to be tough to show up on radar, that we're going to be fine. Now, speaking of rain, it looks like we're headed for a fairly substantial rain event. Not necessarily for us, though. It looks like things are going to be a bit slower than what we were anticipating yesterday, but we're still looking at the main rain threat for us coming on Thursday primarily. Storm Prediction Center, no outlooks for day 1 or day 2, but day 3 they have outlooked a slight risk over South Texas, and then that slight risk area continues over the southeast Texas coast for day 4. And again, some model differences, model inconsistencies, so confidence not especially high in the upcoming forecast after about 3 days. Here's the 060 GFS model run, and there's our trough coming across the Mississippi River, and that should provide us with a few breaks in the clouds this afternoon, and as it does, we should see at least a little bit of sunshine before the sun sets this afternoon. We come back under a ridge fairly quickly as that trough exits and zips out, heading out into the Atlantic, but notice that we're dropping a bowling ball kind of low back into the Four Corners area, northwestern Mexico. And at the surface, of course, high pressure dominating our weather pattern across the eastern half of the country. That bowling ball kind of churns away down there across northern Mexico on Tuesday, so that should keep us in pretty good weather, moisture beginning to return into Texas. Now, by the time we get to 18Z on Wednesday, that bowling ball is beginning to weaken somewhat as it's beginning to come out across northern Mexico and into South Texas. And, of course, that is paving the way for a strong surface low to be occurring over South Texas, and so you see the risk of severe weather. At this point, though, this is when things begin to become somewhat muddled as we get into some model madness with some pretty big differences in the models. Now, there's the European here at midday on Wednesday, and in reasonably good agreement. And, of course, both of them suggesting a warm front should be moving through our area. Now, the question is going to be how much rain we might get with that. I still think the rain chances are pretty substantial for us to get some rain and maybe even a clap of thunder or two. Now, we move on out to Thursday, and here comes our negatively tilted trough. Still substantial trough and a closed low still coming across the Arklatex area. And as it does, we see, of course, a fairly good surface low. Now, the GFS not nearly as strong with the surface low as they were yesterday, with the bulk of the precipitation now not as far east as what we were seeing yesterday. Now the line, which was yesterday somewhere along the Alabama-Mississippi border, is now back in Arkansas and Louisiana. And the GFS, even slower. The line essentially back in East Texas, the surface low back in the Red River Valley. So at this point, confidence just kind of takes a nosedive. We just don't have a lot of confidence in what's going to happen. And looking at the GFS Cape values, the Cape values, as you recall from yesterday's discussion, were over our area. Now the Cape values are back where you would expect them, basically over the lower Mississippi River Valley. So once again, it's a stay tuned situation. The models, a little more out of agreement than they were yesterday. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Now, taking the GFS and continuing on, that closed low opens up as it continues to eject northeastward and is approaching New England. In the meantime, another closed low is dropping into the southwestern U.S., and so with that situation, we would expect a weak front to come through the area. However, because of the southwesterly flow aloft, it looks like the front isn't going to make a great deal of progress, and the European even more different than what the GFS is. So I'm sticking with the GFS for the time being, but we'll have to see. It seems a little odd that both of these models would be that slow, that far out, but that's what they are. Okay, now back to the GFS. The ridge is firmly in place, and you can see this is why the forecast temperatures are going to be relatively mild. And now we've got that deep trough to the southwest U.S. and pieces of energy coming out of that. We've got one over the northwestern U.S. dropping in. We got one at the bottom of the trough, and we have one coming out across the central plains. And so that brings another storm system. Now this one looks, much stronger. So that's why that storm system for Thursday, the models just don't seem to be handling something right, because neither one of them forecasting a very intense low. And yet with that closed low coming out Thursday, I feel like we ought to be seeing something at the surface much deeper than what either model is forecasting. The big trough to our west by Sunday does begin to come out of the Rockies, and as it does, of course, that should mean a substantial perhaps a surface low in the vicinity of eastern Texas and Louisiana, and the GFS suggesting that with a nice rain shield coming our way. Now, going out into voodoo country, and it's kind of like, why bother? I mean, voodoo is voodoo, as you know, and we're seeing flipping and flopping, but we're still seeing a pretty cold look to it. Here is the January the 17th, well, actually midnight on January the 16th. And certainly that is shaping up to be a wet event for the eastern part of the country, as well as turning much colder. And then when we get out at the end of the period around the 20th of January, that has a much colder look. Not nearly as cold, I think, as what we were seeing yesterday. So the cold moderating just a little bit, but certainly much colder than what we're going to be experiencing over the next week. Well, that'll do it for the Weather Extreme video for Sunday. I hope that you have a great day. Thanks for tuning in. James Spann should have the next edition first thing on Monday morning. In the meantime, I hope your Sunday is a good one, and Godspeed.
Thank you for trusting us to be your #1 source for news
in all of Central Alabama.
In back-to-back ratings periods,
more people watched ABC 3340
than any other station in Birmingham.